picture this. You're scrolling through your phone.
Like we all do, yeah.
Right. Maybe you're standing in line for coffee, or maybe you're sitting at your desk actively avoiding a spreadsheet.
Definitely avoiding the spreadsheet.
Exactly. And suddenly you see a political headline that just, it makes your blood boil. It's
Yeah.
just outrageous.
Oh, I know that feeling.
It completely confirms the absolute worst, most cynical things you already suspect about a certain politician. Or maybe a specific group of people.
It hits that exact nerve.
Yeah. And your heart rate actually picks up. You genuinely get mad. You might retweet it or text it to a friend with some all-caps message, or just let it ruin your morning.
It just sits there with you all day.
Right. But then a few days go by, and you find out that the headline was, it was completely misleading.
It usually is.
Yeah, it was a gross exaggeration. Or maybe even a total fabrication that was taken entirely out of context.
So the rational brain kicks in.
Exactly. The rational part of your brain steps in and says, okay, fake news, let it go. We have the real facts now.
But you don't let it go, do you?
No, that's the crazy part. Somehow you still feel angry about it. The visceral feeling just sticks, even when the intellectual facts don't. And why does that happen?
It's a wild psychological trap, honestly. And the most important thing to understand right off the bat is that it is not a glitch in your brain.
Wait, it's not?
No, not at all. That lingering anger is actually a highly predictable feature of how human beings process information and emotion, for that matter.
Okay, that's fascinating.
Yeah, when you start to pull at the threads of why that feeling remains, you really begin to uncover the invisible architecture of our entire modern political reality.
Which is exactly what we are unpacking today. Welcome to today's deep dive, everyone.
Yeah, to be here for this one.
We are going to explore how modern political narratives are built from the ground up. We're looking at how opinions form in the mind, how political operatives have, learned to basically hack those opinions.
It really is a hack.
It is. And we'll look at how campaigns attempt to measure all this chaos. And crucially, the massive rivers of untraceable money that keep the whole machine running.
The money is always at the bottom of it.
Always. But before we jump in, a crucial disclaimer for everyone listening. The mechanics we are exploring today, they're universal.
Yeah, very important point.
We are going to be looking at playbooks and strategies utilized by the left, the right, and everyone in between. Our sources cover the whole spectrum.
Right. Our job today isn't to take a side or, endorse a specific worldview.
Exactly. We're just impartially reporting on the content provided in these sources. We want to show you exactly how the machine works, regardless of who happens to be pulling the levers at any given moment.
That is such a vital distinction. We're essentially looking under the hood of democracy today.
This very complex engine.
Highly complex and incredibly expensive. To truly understand how an election is bought or sold or won, you have to start with the raw material, right?
The human mind.
Exactly. The individual human mind. All these billions of dollars are just trying to manipulate that one thing. So you have to look at the foundational programming.
So let's talk about that programming. Because, nobody is born with the genetic predisposition for a specific marginal tax rate.
Right. Or like a stance on agricultural subsidies. Babies don't care about farm bills.
No, they don't.
Yeah.
So how do we get those stances?
We acquire them through a lifelong process, which sociologists call political socialization.
Political socialization.
Okay, basically, it's how we learn to think politically. And it starts way, way before we were even aware of what politics actually is.
So where does it start?
The strongest programmer, historically anyway, is the family unit. The dinner table is really your first crucible of political identity.
Oh, that makes sense. You hear your parents talking.
Right. If you grow up in a household where the primary conversation revolves around the struggle to pay bills, or maybe a deep distrust of large institutions, your political software is being written right there.
You're absorbing that worldview with your mashed potatoes.
Exactly. But it expands far beyond just the family. It's your gender, your race, your socioeconomic class, your religion.
Leveled education, probably.
Yes, education, geographic location. All of these factors form the bedrock of your worldview.
So depending on that specific cocktail of socializing forces, people generally find themselves gravitating toward one of the major ideological camps.
Broadly speaking, yes.
Like if you look at the conservative ideology, the core driving value there is liberty.
Right. Prioritizing liberty.
It's a worldview that tends to prioritize individual freedom, free enterprise, limited government intervention in the economy, and generally maintaining the social or cultural status quo.
And conversely, if you look at the liberal ideology, that tends to prioritize equality as its core driving value.
Right.
So that translates into a worldview that generally supports government intervention to correct imbalances, expanding social safety nets and broader social reform.
Right, and obviously those are broad strokes.
Very broad strokes. But they act as these foundational lenses. Every single piece of information you encounter for the rest of your life is refracted through those specific lenses.
And this is where the psychology of it gets genuinely fascinating to me. Because we usually assume that if two people, regardless of their background, look at the exact same objective fact,
They'll agree on what they're seeing.
right, you assume they will at least agree on the basic reality of what they are looking at. But they don't.
They really don't. And there's this striking sociological experiment by a researcher named Min Kim that perfectly illustrates this.
Oh, I love this study. It shows how deeply these lenses distort our shared reality. Walk us through it.
So the Min Kim study is brilliant because it completely removed policy from the equation. There's no talk of taxes or laws. It just looks at raw perception.
Okay.
He took two massive pop culture figures, Kendrick Lamar and LeBron James.
Two guys almost everyone recognizes.
Right. And he showed participants different magazine covers featuring them, and then he just recorded their visceral reactions to the images.
So, for example, he takes a picture of Kendrick Lamar on the cover of Rolling Stone.
Yeah.
And Kendrick is wearing streetwear, just a simple t-shirt, and he has a very serious, totally unsmiling expression.
So one participant looks at this, right, and they immediately register it as positive. They say, this is authentic. It shows his roots. It shows the pain of his lifestyle coming up in Compton. It's real hip-hop.
They perceive authenticity. They relate to it.
Exactly. But then Kim shows the exact same photo to a different participant, someone with a completely different socioeconomic or racial background.
And what happens?
That second person has a wildly divergent reaction. They look at the unsmiling face in the t-shirt and they say, he looks threatening.
Wow.
Yeah, they say he looks like a gang member. His hand is in his pocket, and that makes me uncomfortable.
That is wild.
Mm.
They're looking at the exact same arrangement of ink on a page. The same pixels.
But they are inhabiting two completely different emotional realities.
And Kim proved it wasn't just a fluke, right? He did the inverse.
He did. He showed the participants a GQ cover next. On this one, Kendrick Lamar is wearing a very sharp, tailored suit, a nice tie, and he has a bright smile.
Okay, so total opposite vibe.
Total opposite. And the first participant, the one who loved the streetwear, looks at the suit and just recoils.
Oh, really?
Yeah. They say, this is cheesy, he's selling out, he's putting on an unnatural show for the corporate world.
But the second participant...
But the second participant looks at the suit and says, he looks professional, friendly, sharp. This is someone I would want to have a conversation with.
It's like they're looking at two different people.
Kim replicated this with LeBron James, too. He showed him mid-roar on the basketball court versus smiling in a pregame outfit, and he found the exact same bifurcated responses.
So one person's focused and intense competitor is literally another person's angry and aggressive threat.
Exactly. The implication here is massive.
Yeah, because the facts of the image are objective. The man is objectively wearing a suit or objectively holding a basketball.
But the meaning of those facts is entirely customized by the observer's past. We are meaning-making machines,
We crave that context.
We do. We crave the ability to contextualize our environment to keep ourselves safe and socially aligned. So when we look at any stimulus, our brain instantly cross-references it against our own background.
Our race, our class, where we grew up.
Right. And we use that to assign a value judgment instantly.
So if a simple magazine cover of a musician can provoke such wildly different, deeply held emotional realities, I mean, imagine what happens when those same brains look at a complex, multifaceted political issue.
Or a highly controversial piece of legislation.
Or just a candidate speaking at a podium.
Exactly. Every word, every gesture is being filtered and distorted.
Okay, so if our brains are these highly subjective, custom-built processing machines, how does the media actually manage to feed information into them?
That is the big question. And the evolution of media theory over the last century tracks this changing understanding of the human brain.
And it goes from surprisingly naive to, honestly, incredibly sophisticated.
It's a fascinating progression. If you go back to the 1930s, right around the time of World War II, the prevailing academic view was something called the magic bullet theory, or sometimes they called it the hypodermic needle model.
That sounds incredibly violent for an academic media theory.
It does, but it really reflects the anxiety of that era. You had the rise of widespread radio, moving pictures, and of course the terrifyingly effective use of state propaganda in places like Nazi Germany.
Right, people were seeing mass media weaponized for the first time.
Exactly. So media theorists at the time looked at this and assumed that audiences were essentially passive, empty vessels.
Just blank slates.
Right. The belief was that a media message was like a bullet fired straight into the brain, or a needle injecting a specific thought directly into your bloodstream, and the audience was completely helpless to resist its effects.
They thought we were all just programmable zombies, like if the radio says it, the masses will simply believe it and act on it.
Which, to be fair to them, was partly driven by events like that famous War of the Worlds radio broadcast.
Oh, where people allegedly panicked thinking aliens were actually invading New Jersey.
Exactly. But as researchers actually studied human behavior and psychology more rigorously, they realized the hypodermic needle model was just far too simplistic.
People actually have agency.
They do. They have agency, and they have those pre-existing beliefs we just talked about. So the theory evolved into something called the two-step flow.
Ah, okay. This is where we introduce the middleman into the equation.
Yes. Two-step flow recognized that we don't consume media in a vacuum. It added a crucial social component to the mix.
How does that work?
It theorized that mass media messages first reach what they called opinion leaders.
Are these politicians?
Not necessarily. They are just people in your daily life whose intellect or social standing you respect. It could be a politically active coworker, a religious leader, or a highly educated family member.
Okay, I see.
These opinion leaders digest the mass media, interpret it through their own lenses, and then pass their interpretation down to their social circles. So the influence flows in two steps.
So, under this theory, I'm not being brainwashed directly by the television. The television is providing raw data to my very politically active Aunt Susan.
Let's use Aunt Susan.
And then Aunt Susan translates that data at the family barbecue and tells me how I should feel about it.
Exactly. It gives the audience a bit more credit than the magic bullet idea, but it still didn't fully capture the sheer agency of the individual consumer.
We're still somewhat passive in that model.
Right. And that brings us to the modern era and the prevailing framework today, which is the uses and gratifications theory.
This is the theory that feels like it was written specifically to explain the internet, even though the roots of it are actually much older.
It really does. What makes uses and gratifications so vital is that it flips the power dynamic completely upside down.
How so?
It assumes the audience is not a passive vessel, nor are they just sitting around waiting for Aunt Susan to tell them what to think. It assumes the audience is highly active and deeply self-interested.
So we are hunting for specific media.
Yes. We actively seek out specific media because it fulfills a personal goal or gratifies a very specific psychological need.
We aren't just watching the news, we're using the news.
That's a great way to put it. We use it.
Like maybe someone watches a deeply analytical financial channel because it gratifies their need to feel intelligent, like they are ahead of the curve.
Sure. Or someone reads a highly partisan blog because it gives them the exact talking points they need to go win an argument in a Facebook comment section.
Oh, we all know that person.
We consume the media that makes us feel good. And fundamentally, what makes human beings feel good is media that agrees with the political software we already have installed.
It provides psychological safety.
Exactly. We agree with media that makes us feel validated, and we feel validated by media that we agree with. It is a perfect, impenetrable, closed loop.
Let me try out an analogy here to see if I have this right.
Go for it.
Imagine the modern algorithm running your social media feed is like a highly observant, overly eager waiter at a restaurant.
Okay, I like this.
You walk in on a Tuesday, and you order a massive, greasy plate of junk food. The waiter notes that you seemed really happy eating it, right? Your brain lit up with dopamine.
You loved it.
So, the next time you walk into the restaurant, the waiter doesn't even bother handing you a menu. They just sprint to the kitchen and bring you the junk food.
And they do this every single time you visit. Forever.
Exactly. They literally hide the salads, the fish, the soups, because they know the junk food guarantees you will stay at the table and leave a good tip.
That captures the mechanics of algorithmic curation perfectly. You are being served a diet composed entirely of your own pre-existing biases, designed to maximize your time on site for ad revenue.
But, this raises a terrifying logistical problem for a society.
It really does.
If my waiter is exclusively bringing me deep-fried junk food, and your waiter is exclusively bringing you vegan salads, we're eating from completely different informational menus.
We aren't even in the same restaurant, conceptually.
Right. If every single citizen is trapped in their own highly divergent, custom-built digital world, an echo chamber, where they only see facts that gratify their existing worldview, how is a shared political reality even possible anymore?
The sobering reality is that a shared political reality is becoming an endangered concept.
That is bleak.
It is. We are occupying the same geographic country, but we are experiencing completely different informational universes. And while sociologists might worry about that fragmentation, political operatives looked at it and saw an unprecedented opportunity.
Which brings us to a massive shift in how campaigns are run, the era of bypassing the gatekeepers.
Yes, this is a huge pivot.
Because if the internet allows voters to retreat into custom-built echo chambers, politicians quickly realized a profound truth. They don't need to play by the old rules of mass media to reach those voters.
They can hack the echo chambers directly.
Exactly. To really grasp the magnitude of this shift, you have to look at the death of the traditional media gatekeepers. Media analyst Victoria Bonney has a great historical breakdown of this.
She really maps out the timeline well.
Yeah, she points out that for the entire 20th century, if a politician wanted to reach a national audience, they had to go through a very small, very powerful group of established gatekeepers.
You had to get booked on Meet the Press.
Right. Or sit down with Walter Cronkite. Or get a major profile in a national newspaper.
And those gatekeepers had extremely strict criteria. You had to have a certain polish, a certain pedigree. You had to speak in measured, poll-tested sound bites.
You essentially had to look and sound like the guys carved into Mount Rushmore to even be taken seriously.
But the internet shattered that monopoly entirely.
So who was the first to really break through?
Bonney points to the 2004 Howard Dean presidential campaign as the canary in the coal mine here.
Howard Dean. Okay, take us back to 2004.
Before 2004, campaigns relied heavily on massive $2,000 a plate fundraising dinners organized by party power brokers. It was very top-down.
You needed the establishment to fund you.
Exactly. But Dean did something revolutionary. He used the nascent internet to ask for small $10 and $20 grassroots donations directly from voters.
Oh, wow. Direct to the people.
Right. And he raised unprecedented millions, which gave him the financial independence to run a national campaign without bowing to the traditional party establishment.
Though, ironically, it was the traditional media gatekeepers that ultimately destroyed his campaign, wasn't it?
Yes. It's a great caveat. They took that one clip of him yelling at a rally, the infamous Dean scream, and they just looped it on cable news thousands of times.
Until he looked completely unhinged.
Right. Social media wasn't robust enough in 2004 to let him bypass their framing. He couldn't go on Twitter and explain himself to millions of people instantly.
He was a pioneer who built the first bypass road, but he still got caught at the old toll booth.
That's a great way to put it. But fast forward a decade, and the landscape is entirely unrecognizable. Candidates are using mature social media platforms to go direct to consumer 24 hours a day.
Bonney highlights Beto O'Rourke's 2018 Senate campaign for this, right?
Yes. Beto was live streaming mundane moments constantly, getting a haircut, doing his laundry, driving across Texas. He was broadcasting to millions of viewers, completely rendering cable news irrelevant to his narrative building.
And it changed the actual texture of political communication. Highly polished, poll-tested talking points don't just fail in social media, they actively repel audiences.
The currency of the internet isn't polish, it's authenticity. And vulnerability.
That demand for vulnerability fundamentally altered campaign strategy, didn't it?
It flipped it on its head. In the old era, opposition research was lethal. If an opponent found out you had personal debt or a messy divorce, they would leak it to the gatekeepers and destroy you.
Your career would be over.
Today, savvy politicians disarm those bombs by detonating them themselves.
Give us an example of that.
Bonney cites Stacey Abrams during her run for governor in Georgia. Opponents were preparing to attack her for having over $200,000 in personal debt. They were going to frame her as financially irresponsible.
Which would normally be a huge scandal.
Right. But instead of hiding it or issuing a defensive press release through a spokesperson, she just wrote an article and tweeted about it.
Just owned it publicly.
Completely. She said, yes, I have significant student loan debt and I took on debt to care for my sick parents. Like millions of Americans, I know what it means to struggle financially.
Wow. She turned a classic, career-ending political liability into a deeply relatable asset.
She completely bypassed the media's judgmental framing and spoke directly to the lived experience of the voters in her echo chamber. It is an incredibly effective use of the medium.
However,
Yeah.
we have to look at the dark side of this direct access.
Yes, there is a very dark side.
Because if you can use social media to bypass gatekeepers and share authentic struggles, you can also use it to weaponize the news cycle itself. And this brings us to the era of political trolling.
Right, and we should clarify, the word troll usually makes people think of like an anonymous teenager in a basement trying to start fights on a message board.
Yeah, just posting memes to make people mad.
But the political trolling we were talking about is a highly sophisticated, calculated strategy executed by elected officials at the highest levels of government.
We saw this perfected with Donald Trump's use of Twitter, obviously.
Absolutely. He would drop a highly inflammatory, often unsubstantiated tweet at 3 a.m., and it would completely destroy the morning rundown for every major news network.
They had no choice but to spend the entire day reacting to the framing he established while they were sleeping.
That is the absolute essence of hacking the attention economy. The media analysis from Vox we reviewed breaks down the anatomy of this kind of political trolling, and it follows a very specific, repeatable playbook.
They call it the Charlie Brown football formula. Walk us through the mechanics of that playbook.
So, step one is the bait. A politician or their operatives will promise the release of a massive, earth-shattering bombshell that will supposedly expose their enemy.
And the Vox analysis uses a real-world example for this, right? The Nunes memo.
Yes, the Nunes memo. Lawmakers loyal to the administration started circulating rumors that they had a highly classified document proving a massive illegal conspiracy within the FBI to undermine the president.
So they are holding the football on the ground. They are looking right at the camera and saying, this is it. This is the smoking gun. If you are a journalist, you have to cover this, or you are negligent.
Exactly. Which leads to step two, the reaction. The politician understands the pressure the media is under. Cable news networks have 24 hours of airtime to fill every single day.
And they are terrified of getting scooped by a rival network.
Terrified. So, they take the bait. They spend an entire week providing wall-to-wall coverage, bringing on panels of experts to agonize over what might be in this secret memo.
The chyrons at the bottom of the screen constantly flash, bombshell memo imminent.
They build an incredible fever pitch of hype.
Charlie Brown sees the football, he hears the crowd cheering, and he starts running at it as fast as he can.
And then we reach step three, the reveal. After days of breathless coverage, the memo is finally declassified and released, and it is a complete dud.
A total nothing burger.
It relies on publicly available information and proves absolutely none of the massive treasonous conspiracies that were promised.
So then what does the media do?
The media then has to spend the next news cycle explaining to their audience that the scandal they've been hyping up for a week was actually an exaggeration.
Lucy yanks the football away, and Charlie Brown flies into the air and lands flat on his back.
Exactly. But the genius, and I use that word purely in a strategic sense, not an ethical one, the dark genius of the troll is that they do not care about the dud reveal.
Wait, they don't care that they look like they lied.
Not at all. The fact that the memo was fake doesn't matter because they still achieved their primary objective, which relies on a psychological concept called belief echoes.
Belief X. This is from political scientist Emily Thorson, right?
Yes. Thorson identified this phenomenon, and it is the key to understanding modern misinformation.
Break it down for us.
Thorson's research demonstrates that when the human brain is exposed to a piece of negative political information about a person or an institution, it immediately forms a negative attitude toward that target.
Okay, that makes sense.
But here's the terrifying part. Even if that information is later definitively debunked and the person is shown a clear, factual correction, the negative emotional attitude remains intact.
Really? Even if they know it's a lie?
Yes. The echo of the belief outlives the lie itself.
Let's trace how that works in the real world with the memo example. Millions of people are sitting in airports or waiting in doctor's offices or just sitting on their couches watching the chyrons on cable news for a solid week.
And the chyrons say, secret memo alleges FBI corruption.
Then, on Friday, the memo drops, it's a dud, and the chyron changes to memo flops, no corruption found. Thorson is saying the correction doesn't erase the damage.
It doesn't. The viewer's brain just remembers the association. FBI equals corruption.
Wow. So the troll got exactly what they wanted. They wanted to damage the institutional credibility of the FBI, and they succeeded.
And the most perverse part is they got the mainstream media to do the heavy lifting for them.
Right. The media's constant repetition of the accusation, even in the context of questioning it, lies the belief echo into the minds of millions of voters.
It's incredibly effective.
But I have to challenge the premise of the media as an unwitting victim here. Because if the networks are Charlie Brown, and they know the politician is Lucy, and they know she is going to yank the football away because she has run this exact play 10 times in the last year,
Yeah.
why do they keep sprinting at the football? Are news producers just incredibly gullible? Or are they willing accomplices because the hype cycle guarantees them high ratings?
That is the essential uncomfortable tension at the heart of modern journalism. You have to remember the uses and gratifications theory and the attention economy we talked about.
Right.
Media networks are fundamentally massive corporations trying to maximize shareholder value. When a high-ranking politician offers bombshell bait, it generates immense curiosity.
It gets clicks.
It gets clicks, it drives engagement on social media, it keeps viewers glued to their screens through the commercial breaks.
But even if the journalists in the newsroom know it's a lie, the executives in the boardroom know it's profitable.
Precisely. There is a structural financial incentive to take the bait. The ecosystem literally rewards bad faith.
It incentivizes politicians who are willing to aggressively commit to a deception because they know the media apparatus cannot afford to look away from a spectacle.
It's a vicious cycle.
So let's look at the nightmare scenario we've painted so far.
It is pretty bleak.
Voters are locked in algorithmic echo chambers, being fed customized junk food that confirms their biases. Politicians are bypassing traditional scrutiny to hack those echo chambers directly.
Yep.
And the media cycle is being constantly distorted by trolls generating permanent belief echoes based on fabricated outrage.
That's the landscape, yeah.
If reality is this fractured, and everyone is living in their own bespoke digital universe, how does anyone actually know what the public wants? How does a campaign figure out what messages to spend their money on?
That brings us to the incredibly difficult, highly mathematical, and increasingly panicked science of polling.
Polling, okay.
Campaigns desperately need to measure the public mood, but trying to capture the chaos of those echo chambers is like trying to catch smoke with a net.
Let's break down the mechanics of how this is supposed to work in theory, because I think a lot of people misunderstand what a poll actually is.
Okay.
Carrie Lamanna's breakdown on the science of polling is really illuminating here.
It's a great resource.
When I see a poll on Twitter that says 80% of respondents want to ban pineapple on pizza, that isn't a scientific measurement of public opinion, right?
Not at all. A Twitter poll or, a straw poll where they ask people to raise their hands at a county fair is mathematically meaningless.
It only tells you the opinion of the highly motivated people who happen to be in that specific place at that specific time.
Exactly. A scientifically valid poll requires extremely rigid, unforgiving mathematical mechanics. The absolute most important requirement is the concept of the random sample.
Meaning, you can't just stand outside a Whole Foods in San Francisco or a Tractor Supply store in rural Texas and ask people what they think about climate change.
No, because that immediately biases the data. A true random sample means that every single person in the target population, say, all registered voters in the United States, must have an absolutely equal chance of being selected to answer the poll.
If even one demographic is harder to reach, your math is compromised.
Yes. Furthermore, the sample must be what statisticians call stratified.
This is where it gets incredibly difficult to execute, right?
It is a nightmare to execute. Stratification means the demographic makeup of the tiny group of people you poll must perfectly mirror the massive demographic ratios of the actual population.
Give me an example of how that works.
So if you are polling the U.S. and the census tells us the population is roughly 50% female, your sample must be exactly 50% female. If the voting population is roughly 1/3 Democrat, 1/3 Republican, and 1/3 Independent, your respondents must be split into those exact same fractions.
What happens if you mess that up?
If your random phone calls happen to reach 60% retired Republicans who have landlines, your poll is completely useless.
Unless you apply heavy mathematical weighting to the data to artificially correct the imbalance.
Right. Which introduces its own set of potential errors.
And the math itself always breaks my brain a little bit. The foundational rule of statistics says that to get a scientifically valid reading of the entire United States, over 300 million people, a pollster only needs to sample 1,000 to 1,500 people.
It sounds like witchcraft, honestly, but the statistics hold up. If, and this is a massive if, the sample is truly random and perfectly stratified, 1,500 people will accurately represent the nation.
Now, because you aren't asking literally everyone, you have to make a mathematical concession, which is called the margin of error.
Yes. For a sample size of 1,500, the margin of error is generally plus or minus 3%.
I want to stop and focus on this because the media gets this wrong constantly, and we need to elevate the discussion around it. How should we actually interpret that margin of error?
It's crucial to understand. If a scientifically valid poll comes out and says candidate A has 50% of the vote with a plus or minus 3% margin of error, it does not mean candidate A has exactly 50%.
Right.
It means the pollster has generated a confidence interval. They are statistically confident that candidate A's real level of support exists somewhere on a spectrum between 47% and 53%.
So if candidate B is polling at 48% in that same poll, a cable news anchor might say candidate A is leading by 2 points.
They say it all the time.
But mathematically, those candidates are effectively tied because
Right.
both of their potential realities overlap within the margin of error.
Exactly. It's a statistical tie.
I hear the math, I understand the statistical models, but I have to push back on behalf of anyone listening right now who remembers the massive polling misses of recent years.
Oh, there have been some huge misses.
We are a country of over 300 million people. We just established that everyone is living in highly fractured, customized digital realities. And we know that modern presidential elections are routinely decided by 10,000 votes in a single swing state like Wisconsin or Georgia.
Razor-thin margins.
Right. So relying on a sample of 1,500 people to predict that kind of razor-thin outcome feels like trying to taste test the entire Pacific Ocean with a single teaspoon.
That analogy is exactly why the polling industry is currently facing an existential crisis of confidence.
It really is a crisis, isn't it?
It is. The fundamental math of the 1,500-person sample is sound, but it only works if the sampling methodology is perfect. And perfection is becoming physically impossible in the modern era.
Why is it impossible now?
Think about the mechanics. Pollsters used to rely on random digit dialing of landlines. Everyone had a landline, everyone answered it.
You just pick up the phone if it rang.
Today, nobody answers a call from an unknown number on their cell phone. Response rates have plummeted from like 30% a few decades ago to the single digits today.
So if only 2% of people actually answer the phone and take the poll, you are inherently only sampling the kind of weird, highly motivated people who are willing to take a 20-minute political survey from a stranger.
Exactly. And that destroys the random sample requirement instantly.
Because normal people just hang up.
Yes. And beyond the logistical nightmare, campaigns deploy different tactical types of polls, all of which have different vulnerabilities.
Break those down for us.
Well, you have benchmark polls, which a candidate runs quietly before they even announce they are running, just to test their name recognition.
Basically just asking, have you heard of me?
Right. Then you have tracking polls, which are relentless. They ask the exact same question every single day to chart the microscopic rise and fall of support over a news cycle.
And what about Election Day?
You have entrance and exit polls taken directly outside voting locations. But those have notoriously failed in recent years because different demographics prefer to vote by mail versus voting in person.
Right, if you only poll people standing in line, you miss the millions who mailed a ballot 2 weeks ago.
Exactly. But here's the thing. Numbers only tell you what people are doing. They don't tell you why.
And that's why campaigns rely heavily on something that isn't mathematically scientific at all. The focus group.
Focus groups are fascinating because they yield deep qualitative data. You can't extrapolate it, but you get the emotion.
You take a small, carefully selected group of voters, say, 12 undecided suburban moms, put them in a room with a two-way mirror, and a moderator guides them through a detailed discussion.
Right, you can discover the emotional undercurrents that a numerical poll completely misses.
There is a famous and honestly somewhat depressing anecdote about a Mitt Romney focus group that highlights exactly how subjective our political reality is.
Oh, the Gene story.
The Gene story, yes. Romney was running for president, and his internal tracking polls were showing that he was struggling to connect with average working-class voters. So his campaign puts together a focus group to figure out why.
And you might think the voters in the focus group would say, I disagree with his stance on the capital gains tax, or I don't like his health care proposal from Massachusetts.
Because that's the rational stuff.
Right, but that's not what happened at all. The feedback was almost entirely aesthetic.
They didn't care about the policy.
They said he looked too stiff, he always wore an immaculate suit and a perfect tie, and it made him look like a ruthless corporate boss who might lay them off rather than a guy they could trust.
So, faced with this deep qualitative feedback, what does the campaign do? Do they change his policy platform?
No, they tell Mitt Romney to go buy some blue jeans.
It's just so absurd.
He starts showing up to town halls and rallies wearing dad jeans with the sleeves of his button-down shirt casually rolled up to his forearms. He literally changed his costume.
And apparently, the internal tracking polls showed that it worked. The voters actually found him more relatable.
It is a stark reminder that we are visual, emotional creatures first. In the realm of subjective reality, optics and aesthetic framing will almost always override a 50-page policy white paper.
Aesthetics are a massive variable. But even when you strip away the visuals, polling is fraught with pitfalls,
Oh,
right?
absolutely. The actual wording of a question can drastically alter the mathematical outcome.
How much of a difference can the wording really make?
Huge. If I conduct a poll and ask, do you support a woman's right to make her own medical choices? I will get a very high percentage of yes votes.
Because freedom and medical choice sound universally good.
Exactly. But if I poll the exact same group of people and change the wording to, do you support abortion on demand? The yes votes will plummet.
Wow.
I haven't changed the underlying policy at all. I've just changed the emotional framing of the question.
Timing is also a massive distorter, isn't it?
Very much so. If you poll the public about their support for gun control legislation the day after a horrific, highly publicized mass shooting, the numbers will spike drastically.
Because the emotion is fresh.
But if you poll them on the exact same legislation 6 months later, when the emotional salience has faded, the numbers drop right back down to their baseline.
And then you have to account for the most frustrating variable of all. Human vanity.
Yes,
People lie.
they just straight up lie to pollsters all the time.
They really do. There is a well-documented phenomenon where pollsters will ask voters if they support the Smith-Jones Act.
Which is a piece of legislation that does not exist. It is completely made up.
Exactly, it's a trap. And yet, a significant percentage of respondents will confidently offer a strong opinion on whether they support or oppose the Smith-Jones Act.
Why? Why would you have an opinion on a fake law?
Because they don't want to admit to the pollster or to themselves, really, that they are uninformed. They want to save face.
So they invent an opinion on the spot.
And that fabricated opinion gets logged into the data as a scientific measurement of the American electorate.
It's just wild. Let's pull back and look at the sheer scale of this operation.
It's massive. Campaigns are using these incredibly delicate, easily skewed, mathematically complex teaspoons to try and figure out exactly what the voters trapped inside their echo chambers want to hear.
Right.
And once the focus groups and the tracking polls identify that perfect, emotionally resonant message, the campaign has to blast that message out.
They have to saturate the airwaves.
They buy out the social media ad inventory and overwhelm the algorithms, reaching tens of millions of voters constantly across a continent-sized country that requires an astronomical amount of capital.
Unimaginable amounts of money.
Which leads us to the final and perhaps most important piece of the puzzle. Who is paying for the megaphone?
To understand the modern financial ecosystem of politics, we have to recognize a fundamental transition in how campaigns are fought.
Okay, take us through it.
We have moved from an era of people power to an era of air power.
Expand on that distinction a bit. What is people power?
In the 19th and early 20th centuries, political campaigns were intensely labor-driven. They relied on people power. Political machines and party bosses mobilized massive, literal armies of committed volunteers.
People hitting the pavement.
Yeah, these people would walk neighborhoods, knock on doors, pass out physical pamphlets, and physically drive voters to the polls. It was about ground-level organization.
But you can't exactly knock on the door of an algorithmic echo chamber.
Precisely. Today, campaigns are capital-intensive. They rely almost entirely on air power.
And what does air power entail?
That means massive television ad buys, highly sophisticated digital advertising campaigns targeting micro-demographics on Facebook and YouTube,
It's all digital and broadcast.
and maintaining incredibly expensive voter data operations, plus running those endless tracking polls we just talked about. And air power is obscenely, prohibitively expensive.
The numbers in the research are legitimately staggering.
They are.
The data notes that just to run a viable competitive campaign for a single seat in the U.S., House of Representatives representing just one district out of 435, a candidate routinely needs to raise and spend over $500,000,
$500,000 just to be competitive in a House race?
and often much more. To run for a Senate seat, which requires broadcasting across an entire state, the cost jumps into the tens of millions of dollars.
It's a whole different scale.
The research highlights that leading into the 115th Congress, nearly $900 million was spent just on House races alone.
Nearly $1 billion every 2 years, just for the lower chamber.
It's insane. The sheer velocity of capital required to participate in the system ensures that candidates are constantly, endlessly fundraising.
They spend half their day on the phone begging for money.
But where is that fire hose of money actually coming from? This is where we have to examine the history and the evolution of PACs and the explosive rise of super PACs.
Let's start with the traditional PAC, which stands for Political Action Committee.
Okay, what is a traditional PAC?
Historically, a PAC was an organization formed by a specific interest group. It could be a massive corporation, a labor union, or an ideological group like the Sierra Club or the NRA.
And what do?
The purpose of a PAC was to pool small voluntary donations from its individual members, so employees, union workers, organization members, and then spend that pooled money to influence elections and support candidates who favored their interests.
And the influence of these traditional PACs grew steadily for decades, right?
Very steadily. The numbers show that in the late 1970s, PACs collectively spent about $78 million on elections. By 2004, that number had exploded to nearly $1 billion.
And this is a massive, but traditional PACs operated under very strict regulations.
Yes, the system was highly capped. There were strict, legally enforced limits on how much any one individual could donate to a PAC in a given year.
Okay.
And strict limits on how much that PAC could donate directly to a candidate's official campaign. The idea was to prevent any single billionaire or mega corporation from having undue, overwhelming influence.
It kept things somewhat balanced.
It tried to. But then the earth shifted. In 2010, the Supreme Court handed down a decision that fundamentally rewired the architecture of American democracy.
Citizens United versus the Federal Election Commission.
Yes. The Citizens United decision is arguably one of the most consequential rulings in modern political history.
Break down what they actually ruled, because I think a lot of people just use the term without knowing what it means.
The Supreme Court essentially ruled that corporations, nonprofits, and labor unions have First Amendment free speech rights, just like individuals.
Okay, corporate personhood, basically.
Right. And crucially, the court ruled that spending money on political advocacy is a constitutionally protected form of free speech. Therefore, the government cannot restrict independent political expenditures by these entities.
Wow. And out of that ruling, a new, unprecedented political entity was born, the Independent Expenditure-Only Committee.
Which everyone universally knows as the Super PAC.
The Super PACer. The Brookings Institution analysis we looked at provides a brilliant, very clarifying analogy for the difference between the two.
The faucet and the fire hose. I love this analogy.
Yeah, they suggest thinking of a traditional PAC as a faucet. It provides a steady, reliable stream of money into the political system, but it's heavily regulated. You can turn it on and off, the pressure is controlled, and the total volume of flow is strictly capped by the government.
A Super PAC, on the other hand, is a fire hose.
And the fire hose has absolutely no shutoff valve.
None. A Super PAC can accept mathematically unlimited contributions. An ultra-wealthy individual, a multinational corporation, or a massive union can write a single check for $50 million and hand it to a Super PAC.
Just like that.
Just like that. Now, there is one rule. The Super PAC cannot coordinate directly with or give that money directly to a candidate's official campaign.
Right. They can't call the candidate and say, hey, here's $50 million, go buy some ads in Florida.
Exactly. But they don't need to. The Super PAC can simply take that $50 million and spend it independently to run an endless barrage of negative attack ads against the candidate's opponent.
Or positive ads blanketing the airwaves for their guy.
Right. They run their own massive parallel air power operations.
And the most corrosive part of this, because of loopholes in how nonprofits are classified and how disclosure laws are written, a massive portion of this funding is what is known as dark money.
Dark money is a huge problem.
Meaning the public, the voters who are being bombarded by these ads, have absolutely no idea who is actually holding the fire hose. It could be a domestic billionaire. It could be a foreign entity funneling money through a shell corporation. We just don't know.
We have no idea. The downstream effects of Citizens United and the rise of super PACs are profound, and they are actively eroding the traditional structure of American politics.
How so?
First and foremost, it gives wildly disproportionate, unprecedented power to a handful of ultra-wealthy individuals. Before super PACs, if a billionaire wanted to influence a presidential election, they were legally capped at donating a few $1,000s to the candidate.
And maybe a few tens of thousands to the national party.
Right. They had to work within the established party structure. Today, a single billionaire with a specific agenda can essentially finance an entire shadow campaign out of their own pocket.
The research explicitly points out that these super PACs are creating what political scientists call parties outside the party.
That is the perfect way to phrase it. Historically, the traditional political parties, the Democrats and the Republicans, acted as the great negotiators of American politics.
They were massive tents?
They were. If you were a passionate environmentalist and I was a staunch labor union leader, we both existed within the Democratic Party. We might have very different priorities, but the party structure forced us to get into a room, hash out our differences, and compromise on a shared platform.
The party forced coalition building.
But the super PAC destroys the need for compromise completely.
How?
If I am an environmental interest group and a billionaire just gave my super PAC $100 million, I don't need to sit in a room and compromise with the labor union leader anymore. I don't need the party's infrastructure.
You have your own war chest.
Exactly. I can just buy the airwaves myself and force my specific, uncompromising agenda into the mainstream.
Let me try to synthesize this with an analogy because it really feels like a hostile takeover of the entire system.
Go for it. Let's hear it.
It sounds like traditional political parties are becoming obsolete middlemen. It's like a professional sports league. Let's say you have a billionaire fan who loves a specific football team, but the league has strict rules that say he cannot officially buy the team, and he can't sit in the owner's box and call the plays.
Okay.
So instead of buying the team, he just spends $1 billion buying every single billboard surrounding the stadium to tell the coach what plays to run.
Right.
He hires his own private team of commentators to broadcast over the official game coverage and criticize the players he doesn't like. And he pays off a bunch of independent referees to scrutinize the opposing team. At what point does the super picky shadow campaign just become the actual can?
That anxiety is exactly what keeps political scientists up at night. When a candidate's official campaign has $5 million in the bank, but a nominally independent super PAC supporting them has $50 million in the bank, who is actually in charge?
Who is setting the agenda?
Exactly. When that candidate gets elected, who are they truly beholden to? The voters who gave them $20 or the anonymous donor who bought the airwaves for them?
And this convergence of unlimited dark money and highly motivated interest groups forms what is arguably the most impenetrable, powerful structure in Washington.
Political scientists call it the Iron Triangle.
The Iron Triangle. Explain that.
The Iron Triangle is the ultimate manifestation of how policy is actually made behind closed doors. An interest group, fundamentally, is an organization of people with a shared goal who try to influence public policy.
Like who?
You have broad economic groups like the Chamber of Commerce, civil liberties groups like the ACLU, and single-issue groups like the NRA. They don't run for office themselves. They exist solely to lobby those who do.
And the Iron Triangle is how these groups lock in their power.
Exactly. The Iron Triangle refers to a stable, mutually beneficial, and highly exclusive relationship between three specific entities: a congressional committee, an executive agency, and the interest groups or lobbyists in that specific sector.
The research uses the defense sector as a prime example of this dynamic, and it is honestly chillingly efficient. Let's map the three corners of the triangle.
Sure. Corner one. You have the massive defense contractors, companies like Boeing, Lockheed Martin, or Raytheon. They are the interest group.
Corner two.
Corner two. You have the Congressional Armed Services Committees. These are the elected officials who have the power to approve or deny massive defense spending budget.
Then corner three.
Corner three. You have the Department of Defense, the massive executive agency that actually executes the budget and buys the weapons.
Now watch how the money and the power flow around the triangle. The defense contractors use their massive PACs and super PACs to heavily fund the re-election campaigns of the specific Congress members who sit on the armed services committees.
Right. They fund the politicians.
In return, those Congress members approve massive trillion-dollar budgets for the Department of Defense.
And then
The Department of Defense then takes that taxpayer money and awards incredibly lucrative multi-billion-dollar contracts right back to the defense contractors.
it is a perfectly sealed, self-sustaining loop of money and policy, and it operates almost entirely out of view, completely insulated from the erratic swings of public opinion or the voters in the echo chambers.
And when those interest groups do need the public on their side, say, To justify a massive expenditure or a major policy shift, they have mastered the art of exploiting everything we have talked about today.
Oh, they know exactly what they're doing.
They know how our subjective brains work. They know how to bypass gatekeepers. They know how to use trolls and belief echoes. And they have the unlimited super PAC money to manufacture public opinion out of thin air.
We really have to look at the ultimate, most sobering example of this phenomenon provided in the research.
Gulf War PR campaign.
Yes. It is a textbook case of manufactured consent, the public relations campaign leading up to the 1990 Gulf War. This is a masterclass in the invisible architecture we've been discussing.
Set the stage for us. What was happening?
So, in August 1990, Saddam Hussein's Iraqi forces invaded Kuwait. The U.S. government was considering military intervention, but the American public, still suffering from a post-Vietnam reluctance to enter foreign wars, was largely unsupportive.
People didn't want another war.
Right. So a shadowy group calling itself Citizens or a Free Kuwait was quickly formed.
And they didn't just hold protests in the streets. They hired the massive, highly connected American public relations firm Hill and Knowlton.
Yes, paying them a staggering $11 million to manage their messaging.
$11 million in 1990 to execute a single, highly coordinated PR campaign to convince the American public to go to war.
Their mandate was to generate a highly emotional, highly persuasive narrative that would completely bypass logical debate and strike directly at the core of the American political socialization.
And the way they did it was breathtaking in its cynicism.
It really was.
They orchestrated a hearing before the Congressional Human Rights Caucus. They brought in a 15-year-old Kuwaiti girl, identified only as Naira, to allegedly protect her family from Iraqi reprisals.
And she gives this tearful, highly emotional testimony.
She told the politicians and the world that she had been volunteering at a hospital in Kuwait. She testified that she had watched armed Iraqi soldiers burst into the hospital, pull Kuwaiti babies out of their life-saving incubators, and leave the infants to die on the cold floor.
The impact of that testimony was instantaneous and overwhelming. Hill and Knowlton had organized the event meticulously. They produced video news releases, essentially pre-packaged, highly edited news segments, and distributed them to local television stations all across the country.
Talk about a magic bullet injected straight into the brain. They took our most profound, innate human empathy, our deep-seated socialization to protect the most innocent and vulnerable among us, and they weaponized it.
They fed it right to the media gatekeepers who broadcast the tearful testimony on a loop.
It completely bypassed our rational filters. It generated absolute blinding outrage. The narrative shifted overnight, and it secured massive bipartisan public support for the use of military force. President George H.W. Bush cited the incubator story repeatedly in the lead-up to the war.
And then, only long after the war was fought and won, the truth came out.
The story was a complete fabrication.
Completely fake. Naira was not a random hospital volunteer. She was the daughter of the Kuwaiti ambassador to the United States. Her testimony had been meticulously coached and rehearsed by the executives at Hill and Knowlton.
The incubator atrocity never even happened.
It was an $11 million investment that yielded a massive geopolitical war.
It is the ultimate proof of concept. It demonstrates that when unlimited money meets sophisticated psychological manipulation, public opinion is not something that organically bubbles up from the citizenry.
No, it is a product, and like any product, it can be manufactured, packaged, and purchased by whoever has the deepest pockets.
It is a harrowing realization. It forces you to completely reevaluate your relationship with the news, with your own emotions, and honestly, with the concept of democracy itself.
You really have to step back and look at the whole board.
Okay, we need to take a massive breath and look at the whole picture. Let's synthesize the journey we just took, because the architecture is incredibly complex, but it is deeply interconnected.
Let's do it.
We started with the realization that our individual political realities are not objective. They are heavily filtered by our personal backgrounds, our socialized biases, and the unique lenses through which we view the world.
And those highly subjective filters are then targeted and exploited by modern media algorithms. We are sorted into isolated digital echo chambers that act like overly eager waiters, feeding us a constant, customized diet of validation and outrage that traps us in divergent realities.
Because we are trapped in those echo chambers, political operatives realized they no longer needed to negotiate with traditional journalistic gatekeepers. They bypassed the system entirely, hacking our attention through sophisticated trolling tactics.
They throw the Charlie Brown football. weaponizing the media's financial need for spectacle to generate highly emotional belief echoes that lodge in our brains and survive long after the original lies are exposed.
Meanwhile, as the public splinters into these chaotic, angry factions, political campaigns attempt to measure the madness using the increasingly fragile science of polling. They rely on mathematically delicate, easily skewed teaspoons to try and taste test an ocean of sentiment, constantly battling the fact that voters lie and response rates are plummeting.
And keeping this entire massive, dizzying theater on the air, funding the ad buys, paying the pollsters, and hiring the PR firms is a literal fire hose of dark money.
Billions of dollars are pumped into the system by super PACs and interest groups who operate within impenetrable iron triangles, wielding air power far beyond the reach or even the comprehension of the average voter.
It is a sobering, slightly terrifying architecture. But understanding how the machine is built is the only way to avoid being crushed in its gears.
And that brings us right back to where we started our conversation today. Think back to that scenario from the very beginning. You are looking at your phone, you see a headline, and you feel that hot flash of fury bubbling up in your chest.
We all feel it.
Now that you have seen the invisible strings pulling at the system, we encourage you to pause and actively audit your own mind. When you feel that outrage, ask yourself, am I feeling an organic, genuine emotion based on an objective reality? Or is my algorithmic waiter just bringing me another plate of customized junk food?
Am I experiencing a belief echo, carefully engineered by a political operative running a trolling play?
Is this anger genuinely mine? Or was it manufactured and purchased by an interest group's multi-million-dollar air power campaign?
It requires a profound, exhausting level of cognitive vigilance to navigate the system today. You can't just be a passive consumer of news anymore. You have to be an active, deeply skeptical auditor of your own reactions.
Which leaves us with a lingering, deeply philosophical question to mull over as we wrap up. If our deepest political beliefs are curated by algorithms, manipulated by sophisticated trolls, measured by deeply flawed polls, and amplified by untraceable billions of dollars, in the modern era of democracy, how much of public opinion actually belongs to the public?
That is the defining question of our time.
Thank you for taking this deep dive with us. Keep your filters clean, question your outrage, and we will see you next time.